My name is Michael Caplet, and I'm the moderator for the town of Sturbridge. We do not have a quorum bylaw in Sturbridge, so we do not need any minimum amount of voters to have a meeting. Having said that, if you all would please rise, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is to my right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing. As is our practice, we're going to have a moment of silence. We want to remember it's now 6,972 Americans who have died in the Iraqi War, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and in Afghanistan, Operation Enduring Freedom, as well as Operation New Dawn, Operation Inherent Resolve, and Operation Freedom Sentinel. And that's as of today from the Defense Department website. Also want to remember, and I remember last year we were talking about trying to remember not only those people, but the people who were killed in school violence. And now it seems that in our society, it's random violence in our schools, our places of worship, and every other locale. And I think we should join them as well in our moment of silence. And last, certainly, is our own Ron Woolhouse from Sturbridge, who was a longtime member of the Sturbridge Fire Department. He retired as a lieutenant, and I believe he acted as a Board of Health inspector for a number of years here in Sturbridge. So if we could just have a moment of silence for all those purposes. Thank you. You may be seated. First, as I want to introduce the head table. As I've told you before, my name is Michael Caplet, the moderator. Second person to my right is Ted Rozak. If you would stand up, please. And he is the new interim town administrator. Ted comes to us as a retired town manager from the town of Northbridge. And we're happy to have him, and I'm sure he'll do a good job. Thank you. And if we could start on the right. Priscilla, if you could start off.
Priscilla Jimmers, Board of Selectmen.
Chase Kabinski, Board of Selectmen.
Mary Dowling, Board of Selectmen.
Michael Supranat, Board of Selectmen.
Mary Blanchard, Board of Selectmen.
Kathy Neal, Finance Committee.
Jim Waddick, Finance Committee.
Jared Burns, Finance Committee.
Karen Davis, Finance Committee.
Bruce Boyson, Finance Committee.
Joni Light, Finance Committee.
Kevin Smith, Finance Committee.
Thank you. Okay, a few procedural issues. Non-voters, do we have any non-voters in the House tonight? If they would, please raise their hands nice and high. Okay, local bylaw and local and state law requires that I designate an area in which you are to sit. And that area is exactly where you're sitting right now. So that is your designated area. They are not allowed to vote. If you see any of these people voting tonight, please report that to me, and we'll take whatever appropriate action is due. Okay, the town officials, I hope, are all sitting in one area to my right in the front. That gives me and any other town official easy access if we have a question or need to call on them for anything. Okay, well, how we're going to vote tonight, and I apologize. We really had hoped. Lynn Gerard's been working very hard on a project to initiate electronic voting here in Sturbridge. Electronic voting would be with a little clicker. So you would vote yes, or you would vote no, or you might be able to abstain on that. But we've been working very hard, and we got to the point where we were testing it out in this auditorium, and the clickers that we were using belonged to the town of Grafton, and unfortunately, we couldn't get them to work in this room. They work in other locations. They couldn't work here. So we're working on it. We hope to be able to get that done. It's going to make this town meeting move a lot faster and more accurate, and it'll just be a better experience for everybody. But the voting we're going to do tonight is the way we've been doing it for years. That's holding up what is now called is this Crazy Coral? Is that what that was told? I was told is the color. Crazy Coral card, and you'll vote in that fashion. If needs be, We will have a count by divisions, which means separate the room and have counters appointed and count the different votes if we need it. Okay. We generally like the speakers, we'd like to have them come forward to this microphone here. One advantage of a small crowd tonight is that we don't have people traipsing from the back row of the balcony coming all the way down to use the microphone. So we can use the microphone here. And you have to be recognized by the moderator to speak. The only time that we will excuse that is if we may be seeking whether or not we have 7 voters who are seeking a vote by divisions. That's the only time we'll accept people saying things from their seats. Let's see, what else we got here? You would address your comments to the moderator, and it makes a more interesting discussion if the discussion or the argument, if it will, is pros and cons. In other words, somebody for something is followed by something against. Hearing 5 or 6 people in a row who all feel one way about something really doesn't do us a lot of good. It's kind of boring, quite frankly. It's more exciting, if that's the word, to have people hearing both sides. And sometimes that stirs the thought process, and you say, gee, that guy said this, I'll say that. So it makes it more interesting, and we learn more about the issue. Let's see here. Our parliamentary procedure, as has been for many years, is ruled by the town meeting time booklet published by the Massachusetts Moderators Association and supplemented as needed by Robert's Rules of Order and hopefully the common sense and discretion of the moderator. Let's see here. Okay, substitute motions. We prefer that they be in writing. They do not have to be. If you want to make a substitute motion, when the article is called, put your hand up to speak, and you can make your substitute motion. That needs to be seconded. Secondly, we have a motion which has been filed. We have the same motion we've been using at many meetings. I was going to find it here. Here it is. And the chair would accept this motion. That the first motion is that all speakers be limited in any oral presentation to 4 minutes in length, which period may be extended by the moderator in his discretion for good cause. Speakers who are not registered voters may be limited to less time in the discretion of the moderator. Do we have somebody who wants to make that motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? Raise your crazy coral card. Any opposed? Seems to carry unanimously. Okay. That's second motion. Somebody wants to get in, I guess. Okay. Okay. One more thing we have to do before we get on to the actual articles. Fire department regulations. I want everybody to take a look around, familiarize yourself with where the fire emergency exits are. Hopefully we'll never have to use them, but it's best that we know where they are. Secondly, on that theme, the fire department and the state fire marshal's office do not allow anyone to be standing. Everybody right now is sitting. That's great. Please stay seated. It's also much easier for me to count votes if you're sitting in your seats rather than have people standing in the doorway, walking in, walking out. I can't tell what they're doing. Sometimes they're voting, sometimes they're not. Okay, having said that, the warrant. Do we have the warrant, Madam Clerk? It's right on here. Okay, already here. There it is. I've seen it. Okay. This is the town meeting warrant. I'm satisfied that it's been properly prepared, executed, posted in the appropriate locations, and that the return is affixed by the constable. Do I have a motion to accept the return?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your cards. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Next, these article warrants are there for you to read. You can read the recommendation of the Finance Committee, the recommendation of the Selectmen, and you can see the little explanation that's in the box below each article. They've been fully discussed by the Finance Committee, and we would accept a motion to waive the reading of the warrant, the individual articles, and the Finance Committee recommendations.
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And last, parliamentary procedure generally requires that motions made have to be seconded. But we just described the Finance Committee recommendations here in Sturbridge are the main motion already. And they've gone through many, many meetings, even on this short warrant, and discussed it, and had motions and seconds, and just seems duplicative to make them their motions be seconded once more again. So we want to waive the necessity of seconding Finance Committee recommendations. Do we have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Okay, fine. Now we're going to start the actual town meeting warrant. We pick up this town meeting at Article 34. If you're not familiar with the procedure, the reason we started that number is whatever number we ended up at the last town meeting. Our last town meeting was the annual town meeting. So we ended up there with Article 33. So we just continue the numbering on at the next special town meeting. We get around the next next June, when we do our annual town meeting, we'll start our numbering all over again. But for now, this is Article 34, and that's why it is. And this is unpaid bills of a previous fiscal year. Now, that is a little bit different. If I don't say anything, you can assume that the quantum of vote, the amount of vote, is majority. This one, however, an unpaid bill from a previous year requires a 9/10 vote. 9/10 vote. Now, the article originally was approved by the Finance Committee to approve, and I'm going to say, this is your copy, Lynn. There's that. That recommended initially $910.21 of unpaid bills from last year. I've been handed the substitute motion by the Finance Committee that is going to require a second when we get to it, that the town vote to transfer $1,539.26 from free cash to pay unpaid bills of a prior fiscal year. Do we have a second on that? Second. Okay. Kathy Neal, can you give me an explanation as to why this went from 921 to 910 to 1539?
Sure. The 910 was for 2 unpaid bills, and in the time when this first was formulated until now, a 3rd unpaid bill came in, and that was in the amount of $629.05, and that was for paying for labor and materials for a town hall thermostat.
Okay, I'm always curious about this. What were the original unpaid bills?
Oh, yeah, one was, it's in here, Osterman propane for the library in the amount of $360.21, and Dave's pest control for the center office building in the amount of $550.
Okay.
They are in our boxes. The box is under Article 34.
Okay. There's another issue. This is close enough to the original amount that we're going to consider it within the scope of the article, because it's 900 versus 1,500. If it was thousands and thousands more, we might say this is without the scope, but this one certainly is. Okay. Any further discussion of this? Far more than you ever wanted to know about it, right? Okay. All in favor, signify by raising your crazy coral cards. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Next is Article 35. Article 35 is a free cash transfer to the town administrator's search. The recommendation of the Finance Committee is 6-0. The recommendation of the Selectmen is 4-0. And the only problem with that is we don't seem to name an amount here.
Well, actually, in the box, the Finance Committee voted no action on this article. That is why
I'm sorry, I stand corrected.
because we funded it through a reserve fund transfer so that the search committee firm that
Okay.
they picked could
I stand
get
corrected. I
started,
read
yes.
that too fast. Okay. So it's no action?
Yes.
No action in Sturbridge means that unless somebody jumps up at this point, makes a substitute motion, this thing will just wither and die in a few seconds, probably as soon as I stop talking. Seeing no substitute motion, declare that we pass over that article. It's considered to be defeated at that point. Article 36, free cash transfer, town administrator salary account. And this is the recommendation of the Finance Committee, is to transfer $20,000 from free cash to the town administrator's salary account. That was a vote of 6-0. Recommendation of the Board of Selectmen is that also for $20,000. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor? Coral cards. Any opposed? It carries. It is not, however, unanimous. That's a majority article. Article 37, Community Preservation, Lighting Town Barn Field. And that's to see if the town will appropriate $156,348 for the purpose of lighting Town Barn Field. Recommendation of the Finance Committee is to approve the article 6-0. Recommendation of the Selectmen, vote the article 5-0. Is there somebody here from the, yes, sir. Please come to the microphone. Please come to the microphone. Identify yourself, and you can certainly ask your question. We'll direct it to whoever the most appropriate person is.
I'm just new to the area.
I think you've got to turn the mic. There's a switch on the side.
No, it says green. It looks like it's
Is there a green light on? Okay, speak into
Yeah,
it, see if it
a green
works.
light on.
It's on. I think it's on.
Okay. I'm just wondering
Could you identify yourself, please?
My name is Ken Strom, and I live at 47 Karen Road.
Thank you.
And I'm just wondering what this is for.
Okay, is there somebody here from the Community Preservation? Yes, sir. Mr. Strom, if you'll step back and let this young man speak, maybe you'll get your question answered.
I'm Katie and Phillips, 153 Cedar Street. I'm a member of the Recreation Committee and also the liaison to Community Preservation Committee. So this Article 37 proposes lighting the existing baseball field, Little League baseball field that's down at Town Barn. As you know, at the last town meeting, we had the proposal to do more fields over in that area. That was voted down. We do have an existing baseball field there now, so the plan is to install lighting that would allow us to basically free up an extra slot for playing, essentially, because we could, right now, if we're doing any games, we have to start at 5:30, and then we have to be done by 7:30 because as soon as it gets dark. So by putting in the lights, we basically open up an extra slot where we can have games 6, 7, up until probably about 9 o'clock or so. So, thank you.
If you know, so just stay right there.
Yeah.
If you know, it's probably not really your domain, but which purpose of the Community Preservation Committee does this fit under?
So it's coming out of, so I think it's coming from unallocated funds, but I think it's part of the open space.
Open space,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
And are you a member of the
Yeah, I'm the recreation liaison to community
Okay.
preservation.
And the Community Preservation Committee, as we've commented on previous meetings, has not had any presentations in years and years about the residential use of this. Is community preservation going to have some ever? I guess that's a good question, huh? No, I'm not opening a can of worms. This is a legitimate question.
Ed Neal, 3 Old Village Road. I am a member of the Housing Partnership, which has really gotten underway. First meeting was in June, and we've taken a lot of action so far. We're hoping to have, we've met with CMRPC to do a housing study. That'll get us out from under Commonwealth pressure, and we're moving forward very nicely.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. I think it's important for the voters to know how this money is being spent and if all 3 purposes are being addressed. Thank you. Anyone else want to address this article about lighting the Town Barn Field? Hearing no other discussion, this is a majority article. All in favor, please raise your crazy coral card. Whoops, mine went flying. Ah, thank you. Any opposed? It carries. It is not, however, unanimous. Article 38, Community Preservation. Again, removal of the outbuilding at the Plimpton property. As you may remember, this is a property that the town bought through community preservation funds a couple of years ago, and the recommendation of the Finance Committee is to approve the article as written to appropriate $8,355 from community preservation funds. Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That carries and appears to be unanimous. Article 39, online board and committee database software. Recommendation of the Finance Committee is to approve the article as written. That was voted 8-1. Recommendation of the Board of Selectmen was to approve it 5-0. Any discussion on that? Yes, sir.
This is just to...
Please give us your name and
sorry.
address.
Rob Cerny, 124 Lead Mine Lane. This software is just to keep track of who's on and who's off of boards. That's it?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Could somebody answer that? I don't know. Lynn can. Okay.
Lynn Gerard, 70 Cricket Drive, Town Clerk. The software would be tracking history also. Right now, like, we have to go back through the town reports to figure out, like, how long people have been on boards and committees. So this is a good database that will keep track of all the history of boards and town committees.
I think Microsoft Excel could probably do that for you. If you already did the research into who was already on it and you entered it in there, it'd pretty much be just cutting and pasting new people's names, and it wouldn't cost us anything.
We have it right now in an Excel sheet, but this is something a little bit more, I want to say, a little more advanced, where it will populate all, boards and committee members that are due for re-election and are up for their, conflict of interest training and whatnot. And it's just a little bit fancier than the Excel program.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else care to be heard in this article? Okay, it's a majority rule article. All in favor, raise their crazy coral card. Any opposed? It passes. It is not, however, unanimous. Article 40, tree removal and pruning to gypsy moth damage. The recommendation of the Finance Committee is to transfer $242,640 to the gypsy moth dead tree account. And that vote of the Finance Committee was 6 in favor, 2 opposed, and 1 abstained. Recommendation of the Board of Selectmen was 5-0 in favor. Any discussion of that? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your crazy coral card. Any opposed? It passes. It is not, however, unanimous. Article 41, underground utilities study. The recommendation of the Finance Committee is that the town take no action on the article, and the same recommendation from the Board of Selectmen. Finance Committee vote was 8-0 and 1 abstention. Board of Selectmen was 4-0. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, the article is defeated by inoperation or operation of inactivity, I guess is what you want to say. Okay. Article 42. Emergency repairs to well number 5. The recommendation of the Finance Committee is to approve the article as written. That's $11,200. Just for my education, could somebody tell me where well number 5 is? Anybody know? Yeah, Greg's here.
It's south of Waterworks Drive on a dirt road. It's like a half a mile south.
Okay, and you're Greg Morse, the DPW director?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We tape recorded this, and that's why, later on we want to know, well, who's that guy who sounded so smart, Okay, any other discussion of this besides my curiosity? What Mr. Morse had to say was that it's located south of Waterworks Drive on a dirt road. Waterworks Drive goes from the Water Works, the department, over to the Old Sturbridge Village Road, the back road by Sturbridge Village. So I guess it's off of that road. Am I correct, Greg? He says, yep. So that's where it is. Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of this repairs? Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Article 43, expanding perchlorate investigation. And the recommendation of the Finance Committee, I got to turn the page here, is to approve the article as written. Voted 9-0. Recommendation of the Board of Selectmen is the same, 5-0 in favor. And that's to appropriate $32,900 from the Water Reserve Fund for that purpose. Any discussion? Yes, sir. Mr. Mitchell. I'm calling the gentleman. You'll get a chance to speak after.
Dave Mitchell, 27 Woodside Circle.
Dave, why don't you pick it up out of there? You might have better luck.
I guess this comes into the same thing as your curiosity. It doesn't say where the perchlorate is actually located and what it's threatening that needs to be investigated. So could be some more information from DPW.
Okay. Mr. Morris, can you help us out with that?
Yeah, this would be the second phase. The first phase of round of testing that we did, it was trying to see what direction. There was two potential directions that the contamination could come from. One was from a development blasting type activity, and one was from
Greg, hold the microphone a little closer.
one was from development type blasting activity, and the other one was from use of fireworks and other times when they fire off black powder. So the first round of testing really hasn't isolated a hot spot, number one, and number two, we can't really determine, based on the first round of testing, we can't determine the responsibility of it. So this is actually phase two, and we're going to put some different wells in and try to get the source. So it's a continuance of the first study.
I guess Mr. Mitchell's question, as I heard it, was where is this being done? Where in Sturbridge?
It's around the wells. It's both sides of wells 1, 3, and 5. Well 4 is not affected.
Thank you. Mr. Blanchard, did you have your hand up?
Are we in, violation of any standards?
Could you
or how
identify yourself? You haven't spoken yet.
Charlie Blanchard, 26 Farquhar Road.
No, there has been no violation, but the worry is that if there is a hot spot and it comes in, it could transfer or transform the type of treatment that we're currently using. So it's really, we need to know if it's still there and it's coming through at a strong rate, and if it is, how are we going to change treatment for the water supply? So it's, we got to know it ahead of time.
Thank you. Gentleman in the blue shirt in the fourth row. Well, if you have a question, yeah.
Charles Bossy, 47 Karen Road. I just didn't understand what percolate is.
Do you feel you've got an explanation, or do you want a further definition?
Yeah, further explanation.
Okay.
Further explanation.
I think the question is, Greg, you may want to stay down front here. I'm glad you asked, because I didn't know what it was either. So.
Yeah, yep, it was. It basically comes from dynamite, explosives, or black powder. It can be associated with the use of both, and it ends up kind of floating on top. There was a nearby in Millbury when they did the mall up on top. There was a perchlorate issue with all the blasting that went up there. So it's a lot of times it's a man-made issue from development or use of black powder or explosives.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion of this article? It's a majority article. All in favor, raise your crazy coral card. All opposed? Seems to carry unanimously. Article 44, Building Inspector Step Increase. The recommendation of the Finance Committee is to transfer $952 to the building inspector salary account. I guess the question is, Finance Committee, from where? Transfer from where?
I believe that would be from free cash.
From free cash, okay. So you are substitute motion, amending your own main motion to give the source being free cash?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that? Do we have a second? Okay. Any discussion on that? The recommendation of the Finance Committee, you heard what it is, and the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen is the same. 4-2 is the Finance Committee recommendation. 3-1 is the Board of Selectmen's recommendation. Okay, sir, come on down. If that microphone's not at the right height, just pull it out of the thing and use it. Or raise it, but
So I'm
have
Scott
different height people.
Sanderson, 74 Paradise Lane. And just my only question is, for the step increase, was there any type of market analysis done on the wage of this individual, and then how that person's pay compared to that market analysis?
Okay, good question. Who do we feel can answer that? Finance Committee?
I could take a stab at it, I
Okay,
suppose.
go ahead.
So, probably about a year or two ago, the town administrator put forth a plan where department heads who had really never had step increases and were basically stagnating came up with the idea of having steps. And so he created the step system, and it's not yet, I would say, 100% perfect, and this is actually an example of that, the building inspector came somewhere in between a step, and so he didn't quite go up a full step, and that was the decision of the prior town administrator. And so the building inspector did come to us, and we crunched some of the numbers, and we came up with the $952 as putting him up a whole step, although I believe he's still in between a step in the end. But we believe that over 2 or 3 years, everyone will be on a solid step. It takes some time, because otherwise you would have very large increases in salaries. You may have noticed that there were some fairly large increases at the special town, or at the annual town meeting, excuse me, for department heads. So that's sort of the short version of what happened.
Thank you. I guess the question is, was there a comparison made with, I guess, other towns' building inspectors?
I think that was the whole reason for the creation of the steps, because the town administrator was seeing other towns in similar positions at much greater salaries. We do have that 10-town survey that we use. I don't know specifically if that was used for this. I believe that it was. And if you look around even some of our neighboring towns that may not have been on our 10-town comparison, for certain similar positions, they were starting off quite a bit higher than what our staff was making. And it's not really that hard for someone who's here to just go to a neighboring town, and we do want to keep some our employees who have been excellent employees. And so yes, I would say that there was a survey certainly among municipal employees.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Yes, sir, Mr.
Jayesh Patel, 408 Main Street. I was the one who held the lines last in June. I have a real question. How did we miss half a step? So who missed it? And other question is, I see the Board of Selectmen is not unanimous. If I know who voted against it and what was the purpose for it?
Well, Mr. Patel, a couple of points. One is that the vote of the Board of Selectmen is it's done at a public hearing, and you, like everyone else, is entitled to go to that hearing and see how they vote. But the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen is only informational for us tonight.
Okay, then I withdraw that, but I just wanted to see how the calculation was performed, that they missed it half a step or full
Well,
step.
that's a legitimate question. Maybe somebody can answer that? Yeah, go ahead.
I can answer that question. Based on...
Please identify yourself.
Jim Waddick, 78 Allen Road, Finance Committee member. Based on what the building inspector was at wasn't at an even step. He was at like a step 7.2. And so what the town administrator, the past town administrator, recommended was to bring him to a grade 8. Well, the differential wasn't the equivalent of a full step from a 7 to an 8. So what we did was we reconsidered it and said, well, he didn't get the full increment, so on a percentage basis, we looked at what the difference was as a percent between a step 7 and a step 8. We went back to his salary as of June 30th, before the new year began, and we applied that percentage to it. So he got the equivalent of a full step, which brought him actually to probably a step 8.25. Eventually, it will resolve itself because you can only go to a step 10. But he more or less got shortchanged by that little
No problem.
additional increment.
I do
So
have
we
one
fixed
more
it.
question.
Go ahead.
Do we miss any other employee through this type of a calculation? Are we making sure every employees get their fair share of raise? That's my next question.
Thank you. Somebody from the Finance Committee care to address that, or? That's,
I think that was the whole purpose of the step and grade system that Mr. Gomond was implementing as of last year. That was the whole purpose. And over time, it should resolve itself, I would expect. The problem we were running into was every year the scale would go up 3% and the wages would go up 3%, and people were static in the scale. They weren't making progress based on their length of service. And he was trying to resolve that, and I think he's done that with this system that he implemented.
okay, any further discussion on this article? Yes, Priscilla.
Just to confirm the
Would you
conversation about
identify yourself, please, for the...
Priscilla Jimis, just to confirm the point about how the salaries are being looked at, you, just prior tonight to a couple of articles prior, we voted an additional $20,000 to allow the search committee to have leverage in hiring a new town administrator so that the town becomes a competitive entity. Mr. Burlingame was missed, and if you recall at the annual town meeting, the town clerk advocated that her step was not accurate either, and the town meeting voted an adjustment for her. And this is the same kind of concept for Mr. Burlingame.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any hands I'm missing here? Seeing none, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise their choral card. Any opposed? It carries. It is not, however, unanimous. Article 45 is commonly called the School Resource Officer. The recommendation of the Finance Committee is to approve the article as written. The article appropriates some monies, and they total up to be, maybe someone can quickly give me this total, I'd say about $62,000. Am I about in the ballpark? $66,000 for the purpose of a school resource officer. We already have a school resource officer that we fund at Burgess Elementary. This school resource officer would be shared in the two campuses of Tantascwa, the junior high across the street, and this building, the senior high school here. Any discussion on that? Mr. Blanchard.
Charlie Blanchard, 26 Farquhar Road. I'm in favor of having a school resource officer, but I'm not in favor of having the town of Sturbridge pay the entire cost. I just wondered why that was, and whether or not there was any opportunity for Tantascwa to pay their share of the school resource officer.
Okay. Mr. Blanchard, I'm going to direct that question to Chief Ford. He's been very involved in this, implementing this program. Maybe he can explain it to us.
Thomas Ford, your police chief. There was discussion regarding funding. However, pertaining to this article would be solely funded by the town of Sturbridge for this year, the rest of this fiscal year.
Chief Ford, are we going to always be funding this, or how's this going to work in the future?
it's my hope that if this program that myself, the other District 61 police chiefs, and the Tantasco Regional School Administration has been in the process of developing, it's my hope that the town of Sturbridge will be the hub at Tantasco here and on the forefront of a school resource officer program that will be based out of the Tantasco Regional Junior and Senior High School, where we will have, as the town of Sturbridge, a full-time school resource officer here that'll be augmented by the other 4 communities. And it's my hope that with the cooperation of the Tantasco Regional School District, that funding would be available for that augmentation of those additional communities, participating in the program not only here but in their elementary schools throughout the district as well.
Thank you, Chief. Just if you want to stay there for a minute, I don't know. I know no one asked you to prepare this statistic, but can you tell us how many calls a year the Sturbridge Police respond to at Tantasco Junior High or Tantasco Senior High?
No, I can't give you an accurate number of the amount of calls that we respond to up here. They vary from burglar alarm calls to fire alarm calls to calls for service within the school. I didn't come prepared to have that information
I know you
for
didn't, Chief, but is it once a week, once a month? What is it?
I would say weekly. There's a type of call up here.
Weekly? Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? You're going to chance to speak, Mr. Blanchard, who hasn't spoken. Yes, ma'am.
Angie Ellison, 61 Brookfield Road. I just want to be clear. We're paying the entire cost for a regional school police officer.
Is that a question or an argument?
It's a question.
Okay. I think the answer is yes. It's been asked twice and it's been answered. Yes, they are.
Yeah, all right. So then I guess then it's sort of my comment is that a few years ago, I recall coming at town meeting and asking they had the same question about a resource officer. And because the other school systems weren't participating in paying their fair share, it was voted down at town meeting. So I don't know what is changed since, I'm trying to figure out how many years ago that had happened. It couldn't have been that long because I vividly recall being here and taking that vote against it. So I guess the question is what has changed and why is Sturbridge fronting the entire cost? And already it's for the rest of the year, it's not from the beginning of the year. I'm in favor of safety, but I don't think that we should front it for a regional system. The percentage should go through accordingly.
Thank you. Anyone else care to be heard? It hasn't spoken yet. I know you want to speak, Mr. Blanchard. Yes, ma'am.
Ashley Griffin, 95 Cricket Drive. Just a point of clarification. I was at the Finance Committee previously leading up to this, and it is discussed that we would fund it for the first year, and there was discussion around it being a jumping off point and that we were to help get things started. So I guess my point would be, I just want to bring that forward when everybody's thinking about it, to consider we have to start somewhere, and if we, being the biggest community in the area with the most funds available, can kickstart it, does it give the school system the ability to support us going forward?
Chief, could you perhaps address that as to Chief Ford maybe, or somebody from Tantasco maybe? Could Deborah Board? I guess the question, Mrs. Boyd, is, yeah, there are. Sturbridge is paying the first year. What are we going to do in the future?
Deb Boyd, 25 Bates Hill, but speaking as Associate Superintendent for Schools. I first want to clarify, the reason in the past that it was actually voted down was far more than just a question of funding. The school committee had some significant concerns 5 or 6 years ago with the position and an understanding of what the position was. It was actually early on in the stage of school resource officers. What has changed since then is the school committee is now on board. The school committee voted just their last meeting to support the article and support the position, because over the last few years, a lot of the kinks that they were concerned with have been worked out. There's a very recent memorandum of agreement template that came from the Attorney General's office that irons out a lot of concerns that the school committee had. So they feel that their concerns then have been resolved, and they are in full support of a school resource officer up here between the two buildings. Other clarification on current and future funding is, my understanding is, because there's been a lot of meetings with the various chiefs in Union 61, as well as all 6 school committees, that while Sturbridge is looking right now to fund a full-time, the equivalent of a full-time, the other 4 chiefs also very much plan on going to their towns and getting funding for formal school resource officer training, as well as additional hours to cover both elementary and secondary school resource officer services. So in reality, there would be more than 1.0 school resource officers available there. The model is a model that works the 5 towns working with both elementary and secondary. There are many times that we have all 5 towns represented up here for Alice drills or High Five Fridays not too long ago. That all being said, the budget subcommittee certainly knows if the model works, there would have to be future conversations as to how it's funded. I can't speak for them until we see how the model works, what their desires would be. But if all communities are contributing something toward school resource officer services to all of their schools, we would then have to figure out what is the best way to fund it, whether that be at the local level, at the elementary level, or at the Tantasco level. Remember, anything you put in Tantasco is coming right back out to you at more than 50% anyway. And one final note, as far as school funding, I have to do an end-of-year report at the end of every year that allocates not only direct school dollars spent, but also any dollars that the town spends on behalf of school services. Every penny of school resource officer, the current one, goes towards Sturbridge's contribution towards school and net school spending. A second one, regardless of where they were, would also be allocated in that process. So the town of Sturbridge definitely will get credit for spending on schools whatever dollars you put out.
Thank you. Ms. Jimis?
Selectman Dowling and I were on FinCom about 10 years ago when this topic was first brought up. And it was met with a lot of resistance at that time. And as the assistant superintendent just stated, the change since the last time this came before us is that the school committee has seen the benefits of a school resource officer. And that's thanks to our chief, who worked with the other 5 towns to bring this model on board. We're asking to fund this for the rest of this year. We're all going to work diligently to see how we can fund it equally, a little bit more equally for Sturbridge. But in my opinion, it's just my opinion, I don't care whose children I pay to protect in addition to Sturbridge's children. And if this means some sense of safety, and I'm not talking against the shooter necessarily, I'm talking about the other things that are done. When we hear school resource officer, we think of an officer running around the building with a gun. This is not what we're talking about. A school resource officer is exactly that, a resource. They get to know the students. They know if the students are troubled. They help them. And if you look at the newspapers today, suicide is very high among teens. And if one of these individuals can help one child, I don't care what town they're from, every dollar spent is worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to be heard? Yes, sir.
James Alistowski, 127 Masher Park Road. I don't know that the question is there any advantage or not to...
Please try to speak into the microphone so we can all hear you.
A school.
You can take it out. Just pull it. There you go.
Right, there we go. The school resource officer. I think it is a question of does any community have unlimited revenues and resources to spend, and which is the best way to spend it? We've just heard from 2 strong advocates who in a broad context think that this is beneficial. I would point out there was another shooting incident today in North Carolina, and there was a school resource officer in that school at the time. The Parkland school shootings, there was a police officer there. Now, let's get to the larger question that we just heard about what I would call mental health. There is a renowned expert, Professor Dewey Cornell, who wrote a book, School Violence, Facts versus Fiction. He just participated, and he testified before the United States Congress on this topic. He also participated in a session with the Virginia legislature in July, I believe. And, excuse me, I have to, oops, lost my other glasses. Here they are. I quote from an article, "School not being safe is a misperception. Our young people are 70 times more likely to die outside school than inside school. It is important to focus on prevention of school violence instead of preparation," which is something Ms. Jimis referred to. Professor Cornell said, because a guidance counselor or a school psychologist is more likely to prevent a school shooting than an armed security guard is. If we had armed security guards at every door, we would stop less than 1/10 of 1% of the shootings in America. Cornell advocated threat assessment, a multi-step process that involves identifying potential threat from a student and determining the likelihood of that violent act should occur. It goes on from there. I think this community needs to look at what's the most effective way to spend the money. Is it, in fact, on a security officer? And if we're talking about intervening and identifying troubled students, wouldn't actually a school psychologist or someone, there is a I looked online today, and on the staffing for this school and across the street, there is one school psychologist who is the team leader, Mrs. Fisher. I would love to hear from her about her daily demands interacting with difficult students. Should the resources actually be put in that regard if we're trying to prevent school violence? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Sue Waters, Farquhar Road. I am requesting at this time that Chief Ford come forward and explain the concept of school resource officer. It appears that the concept is misunderstood by many, and I think it would be helpful if you heard the work that has been done, that the Tantascwa Regional School Committee has been privy to, and perhaps that will make you help you better understand and make a decision. Chief, would you?
Chief, you may.
Thank you, and thank you for the commentary regarding the community, the school community being involved in the wellness and well-being of all the children and all the staff, the teachers, the parents, the community stakeholders that are there in our schools. In April of this year, Governor Baker signed into law criminal justice reform that made some pretty sweeping changes to a number of laws, and specifically there was mention of school resource officer, there was a mention of the changes in the juvenile justice laws, and through that change there was a development of a boilerplate MOU out of the Attorney General's office, and it goes back to something that myself and the school administration have been working on for many years, and it's part of our relationship, is that we don't serve a traditional law enforcement role in the school. We are truly a resource in that school. We are part of the community. We are not the disciplinarians in the school. We do not enforce school policy or procedures. We do not take care of people who are misbehaving, that responsibility lies with the school administration and not with the police department. In the school community, our responsibility is to contribute our expertise, to contribute our resources, our availability, our contacts through the criminal justice system, through the court system, through any of the other programs that are out there that will help those children that are in need, that we identify and that we work with as a team. I didn't go into much detail about the program that we have conceptually pulled together between the entire district, and this school resource officer program is something that's shared through all the communities that come to Tantasco. Right now, yes, Sturbridge does have a school resource officer full-time K through 6, but the other communities do not. And so when we have the children who come up here from those other communities, they don't have the good fortune of having that experience in their first time maybe seeing a school resource officer, their first interaction with a resource officer or any officer in the school was when they come up here. And we borrowed a concept from our brothers and sisters in public safety and the emergency management side and took a whole community approach to our response to the school resource officer program, and hoping that we would create a greater resilience amongst this school community, that we would increase collectively our abilities and our preparedness, that we would standardize our response protocols for emergencies, for training, and for problem solving, so that we work together for the greater good of the children up here, and that we are truly a resource and not a statistics. How many times did we come up here, but truly part of this community integrated into the school system here, and it's got to start somewhere. Sturbridge has always been ahead of the curve in every avenue of anything that we do, and I think that it's about time. It's something I've been trying to get started in the system here for 12 years now, and I think it's about time we take the step forward and use ourselves as the hub. We begin this program out of here, and I think all the other communities will fall in line. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that hasn't addressed it? Yes, ma'am. We like to have new speakers instead of having people just going back and forth. Then we allow some of the other people to come back.
Hi, my name's Heather Hart. I live at 520 Lead Mine Road. I think this is a great program, and it's something that we should get behind. We had no discussion when we appropriated $243,000 to take care of gypsy moth problems with trees. Not one person raised their hand and had to talk about it. But we talk about $50,000 for a child in this town. I think we are sadly looking at the wrong problem. I think we need this program. I've advocated it with members of the school board before, and I think with the state of mind in this country, I think it's money well spent. And I applaud you for doing this for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that hasn't spoken yet on this article? Okay, Mr. Blanchard, you've had your hand up. Oh, I see. Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bruce Boyson, 1 Old Brick Circle. And I want to just talk about the program a little bit more general terms. I hope I don't get anything wrong. If I do, I apologize to the chief in advance. But what we're doing is funding the Sturbridge part of this, and we're hoping.
You've really got to hold that close, Mr. Boyce.
We're taking a calculated risk that the other committees and school committees and town meetings will approve another addition to this one officer, and that those costs will not be borne by Sturbridge. So I see that people are, seeing that higher amounts that Sturbridge is paying of these expenses, but this expense will develop benefits and dividends down the line for the whole program. I hope that made a little bit of sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that hasn't spoken yet? Yes, sir.
Robert Briere, 50 Arnold Road. I drove school bus for 20 years. I saw the behaviors of many children in those 20 years, mostly good. I was talking to a police officer one day who had been in the schools, and I said, I don't think we've even talking about a resource officer. And I said, what good is it for you being in the schools? Probably nobody's going to get shot, probably none of this or probably that. He says, one of the biggest things we have going for us, and I think you'll all relate to this, if a child has a problem, particularly at home, he's certainly not going to talk to the parent about it. He's certainly not going to come in and talk to somebody at the school about it. First of all, they're embarrassed, they're ashamed, and they could be getting hurt. But they will, trust me, they will go up and talk to the friendly policeman, and they'll tell that policeman the story of what is happening to them. Now something can be done about it. So it's not always about the shootings going on in the schools. It's not all about having a cop in the school. Geez, who needs a cop in the school? That person is going to do more good for your children than anything I can think of. And that's conversation I had with him stuck with me. And I think we need to approve this. Who cares where the money comes from? Do it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Blanchard, you've been waiting a while. You're all set, okay. Other people had their hands up earlier that had spoken. Did you want to speak again?
I want to make it clear. I'm not against a resource officer. I am for the other communities participating in the cost. We can have an officer, but it needs to be a shared cost as it is for the it's a regional school system. It should be a shared cost. The other piece that isn't being taken into consideration is that there's other costs associated with an employee, the unclassified, the health insurance, the retirement costs. All of that, because this person now is a Sturbridge employee, will be a burden upon Sturbridge to pay. It's not about the officer. It's not about the position. It's about the cost that needs to be shared by everybody that tied and bought into a regional school system. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Jimis, you had your, I'm sorry, Mary Dowling, thank you.
With all due respect to the last speaker, one thing's perfectly
Please
clear.
identify yourself. I don't
Mary
think you've spoken.
Dowling, 9 Wedgwood Road. You vote against it tonight. We've stalled it for a few more years. Get this program off the ground. Do the right thing by our students. We have one in the elementary school. It makes 0 sense that we don't have one for growing adolescents in the junior high and in the high school. If this was Sturbridge High School, we wouldn't even hesitate. So shame on us if tonight we make regionalization the reason that we didn't vote for common sense, get the program off the ground, listen to our chief of police, and vote for the school resource officer.
Ms. Jimis.
Mr. Moderator, I was just going to ask to move the question.
Okay, that requires a second. Okay, so I hear several of them. And that cuts off, there'll be no discussion of this. If it passes, it's a 2/3 vote. That's the end of discussion. We go straight to a vote. So all those in favor of closing the debate and moving on to a vote signify by raising their crazy coral card. All those that are opposed to cutting off debate. That carries unanimously. It's getting close to the Patriots. I'm sorry, does not carry unanimously, almost. Okay, so now we're coming to the vote. This is a simple majority. It passes, but not unanimously. We're coming to a vote. This is a majority vote. Everybody who's in favor of the Finance Committee recommendation, which is to appropriate the $66,000 from 3 or 4 different sources as set forth in the article, raise their card, please. All those in favor. Hold your cards up for a second. All those opposed, raise their card. It carries by far more than a majority. Article 46, full-time public safety dispatcher. The recommendation of the Finance Committee is to approve the article as written, and the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen is to approve the article as written, both unanimous votes. Having said that, could somebody explain, I thought we had full-time dispatchers at the police department. Chief, can you maybe help me on this?
We do have 5 full-time dispatchers in the police department.
We do not.
We do, 5.
5? Yes. So why are we hiring another one?
Because we don't have the coverage that I think is necessary. Again, this is one of those positions that I'm very passionate about, that I've been cautioning each budget year, and I start to see the deterioration amongst staff members. This position has been chronically understaffed for many years. The town of Sturbridge, complying with state law, now provides emergency medical dispatch services to the community, which this means is that when you call 911 for an ambulance, the dispatcher on the other end is providing pre-arrival instructions to the calling party about how to help the person that's in crisis. And this information not only assists the emergency medical services crew that's on its way, but also provides critical care to the person on the other end. I'm starting to see the results of years and years of shorthandedness take its toll on the members of our public safety dispatch center. There's only 5 of them there. Right now, there's 4 shifts that go unfilled every week. Many times there's only 1 dispatcher on at a time. So if a fire comes in, or if there's a crash, a car crash that's requiring 3 officers to respond and 2 ambulances to respond, tow trucks to be called, life flight to be called, the Department of Transportation to be called. You've got 1 person in there making all those calls. So could you imagine if you had an emergency that came in on the other side of town, and it's happened? I've had 1 dispatcher out on medical leave. I've had a couple of other dispatchers have some health issues, and I'm starting to see the toll that it's taking. Because we provide the fire service, not only their fire dispatch, but the emergency medical services dispatch, the National Fire Protection Association mandates through their standards that if you have EMD service in your community, you're supposed to have 2 dispatchers on at all times, 24/7. We don't do that. And if 1 person calls out sick or 1 person takes a day off, it has to be filled by overtime. And we just don't have the staffing available. We've tried to correct this by researching regional dispatch programs, and thus far nothing has worked for us. So this is not a new issue that has been brought up before my budget, but we just hit a critical spot over the summer, and I found that it was necessary for me to come here to try to get another dispatch position in place before we have anything critical happen at the police department and the fire department. And just to add to that, the fire department has also doubled the size of their department. They're handling more calls. The 911 service that we provide before was just your home telephone. When you dialed 911, came in to the police department, your wireless 911s went to a different center. All those wireless calls and text to 911 calls are now coming into Sturbridge, so there'll be additional volume of calls coming into us as well that our single dispatcher or at times our double dispatchers will have to handle. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any other discussion on this? Yes, sir.
Scott Sanderson. I'm just curious how many hours of overtime in dispatcher services in the last 12 months, if anyone knows that?
Chief, can you answer that? Or?
Are you asking what the average number of overtime hours per dispatcher is, or in its entirety?
I was just curious more of its entirety. If there's 2,080 hours in a year, if you've worked 2,000 hours of overtime, that's one person, and would overtime go down?
I don't think that unless we significantly increase the staffing numbers, that the overtime is going to go down. Right now, we are at 100% fill rate with the number of dispatches we have, and that will continue until we add approximately 5 more dispatches, where if one dispatcher takes the time off, it won't have to be filled because there will already be somebody there in place. I didn't bring the statistics to show how much overtime there is, because every shift that they take off is 100% filled. So that means that if we have one dispatcher that has 5 weeks of vacation, we have another that has 4, and the remaining 3 all have 3 weeks of vacation that all have to be filled on top of their 11 holidays. Random sick days that they take as well is all filled with overtime. Prior to me putting this warrant together, each dispatcher was averaging 24 hours of overtime a week, and most of that was forced.
Thank you, Chief. Anyone else care to be heard in this article? Seeing none, I think we're ready to vote. It's a majority rule article. All in favor of the recommendation of the Finance Committee, please raise your coral cards. All opposed? It carries, and it seems to be unanimous. Okay. Article 47, ambulance stretcher. The recommendation of the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen is unanimously to approve the article as written. That's to appropriate $60,000. Chief Grasso, could you perhaps just tell us, from at least tell me, what is an ambulance stretcher? And why do we need it?
John Grasso, Fire Chief. The standard of care in EMS has now become power stretchers. In years past, we would physically put the patient on the stretcher, physically lift the stretcher into the back of the ambulance. The now standard of care that we're moving toward is to have mechanical stretchers do the work for us. 2 reasons for this. One is it reduces the risk of injury to the EMS providers. Number 2, it reduces the liability exposure to the town in the unlikely event the patient is dropped. Our society is becoming increasingly more obese. Our patients are becoming increasingly more difficult to lift. And in the last 18 months, we had 2 back-related injuries that put our people out for long-term disability. Each back injury estimates to around $71,000 in cost for the town while that person's out of work. So these new stretcher systems, we put the patient on the stretcher, the mechanics lift the stretcher into the back of the ambulance, reduces the risk of injury, reduces the liability to the town.
Thank you, Chief. Any other discussion on this? Now we know what it is. Okay. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
Chief, what was
Please
the last time
identify yourself.
Rob Cerny, 124 Lead Mine Lane. What did we pick up our last ambulance? Our newest ambulance?
Chief, you can answer that. Go ahead.
Yeah, our newest ambulance is a 2015. That's what this appropriations for.
Okay. Now, when are we going to be replacing? Don't we have 2 ambulances?
We do.
Does the other one have the lift?
It does not. That one is on the plan to be replaced this year. A capital appropriation was made at an annual town meeting.
That one will have been included in the cost.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, I think we're ready to vote on this. All in favor, raise your coral cards. All opposed? It passes. It is not, however, unanimous. Article 48, Reserve Fund. Transfer from free cash $55,000 to the Reserve Fund. That's the account that the Finance Committee uses for emergencies. I guess the easiest way to put it. The recommendation of the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen is unanimous to approve it. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? It carries and it is unanimous. Article 49, appropriation of unused bond premiums. And the recommendation of the Finance Committee is to appropriate $19,254.69 to pay the cost of lighting on Town Barn Field, $117.01 to pay the cost of capital replacement needs in the Water Department, and $136.86 to pay the cost of capital replacement needs in the Sewer Department, all funds which were realized from the premiums paid to the town upon the issuance of bonds. So, any discussion of that? Yes, sir.
Brian Fitzgerald, 6 Old Town Way. Does the cost for lighting the field actually offset some of the cost we approved earlier? Or is that actually in addition to the funds we appropriated earlier for lighting the fields?
Okay, Mr. Phillips, is he still here? Did he leave? Well, somebody, I have people pointing at each other here. Okay. Barbara, I'm sorry.
Barbara Berry, Finance Director. There may be some costs that are incidental to the lighting project, and so what we intend to do is to use the funds from this article first, and then if there's any leftover funds, they will close back out into the Community Preservation Fund.
So I guess the answer is that the total cost of this, with incidental costs or not, may involve both of these appropriations.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor? All opposed? Seems to carry unanimously. Article 50, the adult use marijuana zoning bylaw. This is a zoning article, so this will require a 2/3 vote for approval. And before we begin, just a couple of notes or thoughts. First, that this is not a discussion of whether or not we should approve the use, sale, distribution, cultivation, whatever, of marijuana in Sturbridge. This article is tailored to what regulations should we impose and where should we impose them, in what parts of town, for the sale, not the use, because that's different, the sale, cultivation, distribution, and the 4 or 5 purposes set forth in the statute. That's what it's about. So this is really not redebating the issue of whether we should approve it or should we not. Second point is we presently have a moratorium on any of these activities until December of this year. In December of this year, that moratorium will expire. And if by that time we have not adopted any sorts of regulations, then there'll be no control under the marijuana statutes for any sort of business that wants to come in. Naturally, any business is subject to all the other controls that are there for normal zoning of business, where they can do it, where they can't, and that sort of thing. But to put in any marijuana regulations, you will do it now or run the risk that some or all of the businesses will be unregulated if and when they do come to Sturbridge. So that's what this is about. Okay. First, this is a zoning article, and all zoning articles have to have a hearing before the planning board before they can come to the town meeting. It is not required the planning board must approve it, but they must have a hearing and give us a report at the town meeting. And for that report, I'm going to call Mr. Blanchard.
Yes, Charlie Blanchard, 26 Farquhar Road, Chairman of the Planning Board. The Planning Board held a public hearing on Tuesday, October 9th, 2018, to consider a proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw that would delete Chapter 31, Temporary Moratorium on Recreational Marijuana Establishments, and insert a new Chapter 31, Adult Use Marijuana, and related definitions in Chapter 2, as well as the proposed amendments to the definitions for off-site medical marijuana dispensary and registered marijuana dispensary. The hearing was legally published in local newspapers for 2 consecutive weeks, and all others were notified as required. At the meeting of October 9th, 2018, on a motion made by Susan Waters, second by Heather Hart, and voted 5-0, the Planning Board voted to support the proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw as written and asked that these articles be placed on the special town meeting warrant.
Thank you. So that meets the statutory requirement. Now, having said that, can somebody give us the meeting a short overview of what the statute actually does? Mr.
I'd
Blanchard,
be
you-
happy to do that, yes. As the article mentioned, we had a moratorium in this Chapter 31. This will replace that with what is now called adult use marijuana use. And we currently have Chapter 30, which is the medical marijuana use bylaw and overlay district. And what this basically does, it allows all of marijuana businesses to be located by special permit in the industrial park, general industrial, or medical marijuana overlay district. And those would be, for example, a marijuana cultivator, a marijuana independent testing laboratory, marijuana product manufacturer, marijuana research facility, a marijuana transporter, and marijuana micro business. So what this Article 31 does, it also allows retail sales then of adult use, formerly known as recreational marijuana, in the commercial districts. And what we have up here is the zoning maps that show that there are basically 3 areas for, in our commercial district. This wouldn't be allowed in the historic commercial, and it wouldn't be allowed in the commercial tourist, but it would be the commercial district, which is basically along Route 131, on Route 20 from, say, New Boston Road east, and then also there's another area down where the host is and so forth, and then a small commercial area at the end of 148. So those would be the areas that allow recreational or adult use marijuana retail sales.
Okay, thank you. Don't go far, Mr. Blanchard, in case we have questions here, okay? Anyone else would care to be heard in this?
Mr. Moderator?
Some,
Up here.
up there, okay, Kevin, Mr. Smith.
Okay. All I want to do is point out.
Please identify yourself.
Oh, Kevin Smith, 148 Fisk Hill Road. All I want to do is correct a typographical error. So I would amend the article in section 31.03, subsection H. There's a statement there. It says released outside the facilities and to and prevent odor. I'm pretty sure that second and is a mistake and should be stricken from the article. So that I would make a motion to amend the article to strike that second and then otherwise approve it as written.
Which sentence is this is?
It's about the fifth, sixth sentence down. It actually begins with and prevent odor, but if you follow it up to the line before it, it says and to and prevent.
Okay, maybe you can give me a hand here, Mr. Bard. Is it in here, in H? Yeah. There's a so, you want to remove the second and, is that what it is?
That would be my intention, yes.
Okay. I guess grammatically that makes more sense. Okay. Is there a second to that? That's a substitute motion. Is there a second to that? Second. Okay. Any discussion? Now, we're talking about a substitute motion. All that does is taking out one word and when its application. The discussion on the merits of the bylaws should be the same, but any further discussion needed on this? Having said that, can we go back to the bylaw itself? We're going to vote on the substitute motion eventually, but all it does is take the word and out. But any further discussion in this article? Yes, sir, Mr. Boyce.
I just don't see that this is going to encourage businesses to locate in Sturbridge. I think we'll be at a disadvantage to other communities. I think it's over-regulated here, and I think we can do better.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else care to be heard on this bylaw? Yes, sir.
Rob Cerny, 124 Leadmine Lane. In section M, and it says clubs, lodges, other private grounds, nonprofit and private, allowing on-site social consumption of marijuana or marijuana projects, but not operating as a licensed marijuana social consumption operator are prohibited. One thing I was hearing about when it came to like the marijuana tourism out in Colorado and one of the other states was they had like marijuana bed and breakfasts, which would that's kind of like right up our alley, like bed and breakfast in, you know, quaint little New England. It could be somebody's idea that it may be a good business plan to have that kind of operation in our town, maybe out, you know, further up one of the, you know, out in the woods somewhere. Would that be prohibited with this bylaw?
Mr. Blanchard, if you
Yeah,
can.
Right now, it's my understanding that the current law in Massachusetts doesn't allow that. And so we wanted to be clear that we also don't allow that. If the law did allow it, then we could revisit regulations for something like that if the town so desired.
So in the future, when the state does change their rules, because even Charlie Baker, he was saying that, you know, it's evolving, the whole marijuana, because we don't know what the hell we're doing yet. Heck, we're doing yet. And it's going to be evolving. So in the future, if the state were to change their regulation on just that, like bed and breakfast or an on-site consumption, would we have to would it go to town meeting again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
Okay, any other discussion? Yes, sir, Mr. Mitchell.
Dave Mitchell, 27 Woodside. Charlie, did the planning, I apologize for not being in the public meeting, you may have answered that question. Is this language of the zoning amendment based on standard language that's been developed for other communities, such that it's been vetted by the lawyers and all that sort of such? Often zoning board changes have, basically, we get them from other sources. I was just curious what the source of this was.
It was reviewed by town council, and it's our understanding that it does meet all the requirements that would be acceptable to the state law.
Yeah, we are graced tonight with Joel Bard, town council, present, and I think it goes without saying that we wouldn't have gotten this far if he had not at least looked it over, and from a technical point of view and not so much a substantive point of view, whether that meets the various legal requirements of the marijuana regulation scheme that's in place right now. It's up to us what we enact. It's not up to Mr. Bard what we enact. So, with all due respect. Okay. Any other discussion on this? Okay, I think we're ready to vote. This is a 2/3 vote, so we'll need 2/3 of the voters to approve this. All in favor? I'm sorry. Oh, this is the substitute motion, removing that word "and" in that sentence, so it would be at least grammatically or syntaxically it makes sense, okay? And that was a good catch, Mr. Smith. Thank you. Okay, all in favor of the substitute motion? All opposed? Carries unanimously. Okay. Let's see, was there opposition? Let me see if there was. If you have, please put your hand up. I want to get this right. Okay, it passes. It is not unanimous. It is far more than 2/3. Okay. Article 51 is a companion article to Article 50. That's right. No, we don't have to vote on it. We voted on the substitute motion to approve it with removal of the word "and." That's all. It's done. No, we're not. It's acted on. We're moving to 51.
That was just a substitute motion.
No. That was to approve it with the one word missing. We'll take the one "and" out, and that's what we just did. Okay, let's revote it. The substitute motion is to approve the article without that second "and." So when we do a substitute motion, that's the main article we're dealing with. So that's what we're going to do. Okay? All in favor of the substitute motion, which means if you vote in favor, that's it. You've approved the article, but with the removal of that "and," that offending "and." Okay? Except for that, it's the exact same article. That's what you would be approving. Everybody got it? Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. It passes. It is not, however, unanimous. Passes by far more than 2/3 for the second time. Article 51, marijuana. This is a companion article to 50. This is definitions. Again, because it's a zoning article, it's 2/3 vote required. I don't have a substitute motion. I don't think I'm going to get one on this one. So any discussion on this? This is just listing a bunch of definitions for use in the implementation of the statute, of the bylaw, actually. Any discussion on it? Hearing none, all in favor, 2/3 vote. Yes, hold on, Mr. Bard. Yes, thank you, Mr. Bard. Mr. Blanchard, can you give us the planning board report on this? Was there a planning board report? Good catch.
Yeah, they were both covered by the same report that I have. Those were both of these, the Chapter 31 and the definitions in Chapter 2 were all listed in that, both that I gave you
the same
before.
vote?
It is, yeah. And the one big, the biggest change in this really is, in the wording before, the medical marijuana had to be a nonprofit. It no longer has to be a nonprofit. So that's what that, the major change in those definitions is.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, 2/3 vote. All those opposed? That carries. It is not, however, unanimous. 52, stretch code renumbering. The recommendation of the Finance Committee is to approve the article as written, voted unanimously by both the Finance Committee and the recommendation of the Selectmen the same. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Article 53, free cash transfer, senior center flooring. That's to transfer $10,042 for the purpose of replacing the flooring in the second floor of the senior center. The recommendation of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee is unanimously to approve the article as written. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor? That's a majority article. Majority. Any opposed? Okay. Is there a second? All in favor? Meeting is dissolved. Thank you, Lynn Gerard. Thank you, Dave Covino. Thank you, Bruce and Dave. Bruce and Steve, I'm sorry.